Hey book nerds, welcome to my channel. So today I'm going to be talking about books or series that I really want to reread. These are either books that I absolutely loved and I want to see if they're as good as I remember, or they're books I absolutely hated and I want to see if they're as bad as I remember. So I'm just going to launch straight in and start going through them. First series I'm going to talk about is the Gone series by Michael Grant. These were possibly my favourite books about 5 or 6 years ago when I first read them. It's a young adult series about this town, and one day all the adults in the town just vanish, and the kids are left alone, and there's like a dome over the town, and all the kids start developing crazy superpowers, and it's kind of like Lord of the Flies but with superpowers, and it's amazing. It's really brutal. It's very dark for a young adult series. And it's written by Michael Grant, who is married to Catherine Applegate, who wrote the Animorph series, which is one of my favourite series when I was younger. And I think she's not credited, but I'm pretty sure they co-write all their books together and they don't always credit each other. And it's got the kind of same tone as Animorphs, which is kids dying brutally in horrific ways. It's got a really interesting plot. It's got really in-depth characters, and I love it. I also love how the books look. They've all got this neon kind of page effect. You can see the other ones on the back. I've got them on my shelf, but I didn't want to pull them all down. There's about 7 of them. And yeah, I'm hesitant to start this series again because this is the first book. It is about 560 pages. And they just get longer and longer, so they're very long for a young adult series, which means it's going to be a bit of a commitment to reread them all, but I definitely want to. There's also the slight thing with Michael Grant where he made some problematic comments on Twitter. This was a couple of years ago now, and there's a character with autism in this book. And now that I am older and wiser and have 2 psychology degrees, I would like to reread it and see if all the controversy about this autistic character is valid, or if I think that you can justify the use of autism in the story. Kind of worried about that. I don't want to ruin my childhood favourite, but also I think it's very important to have good representation. And I don't want to tell everyone this series is great if it turns out that now I'm older and wiser, I think it's kind of problematic. Yeah, so that's the first series I want to read. The second series I want to reread is for very different reasons, and this is the House of Night series by Kristen and PC Cast. Sorry, cut off the cover there. This is a vampire series. It's a vampire romance series, and it is one of the craziest things I've ever read in my life. I think the series has 17 books in it, and when I first started reading it, I think I was 14 or 15, and I absolutely loved it. I thought this was so refreshing. This was completely different from Twilight. This had a realistic main character, and lovable people in it, and they were all like real teenagers, and I must have just been out of my mind, to be honest. So this book is about Zoe Redbird, who is the biggest Mary Sue that ever lived. She becomes a vampire, and in this universe vampires attend a school called the House of Night. Fledgling vampires have to be around adult vampires or they'll die. Not everyone can survive the process into changing into a vampire. If you're weak or sometimes just randomly, you will also die. And very, very, very special vampires have elemental powers, and usually a character will only have 1 elemental power. Our super special protagonist has all 5 elemental powers. The 5th element is spirit in this one, and all of her friends each incorporate one of the other elemental powers, and she basically, as the books go on and on, she just becomes more and more special. She has about 5 love interests at any given point, and I'm not even exaggerating. And yeah, I basically want to reread this because I recently found out that one of my best friends read it when she was young and she wants to reread it, so I think it'll be a really fun thing to do roughly at the same time. And I also want to remind myself of how insane this series is, because you know when you think something can't possibly be as crazy as you're remembering it, and yet I know that this is. Yeah, so I'm going to reread these at some point. They're shorter than the Gone series, but I'm going to need to take breaks in between each one, I think, to kind of regain my sanity. That's that. The next book I want to reread isn't a series. This is kind of an obscure book, but the author did release something recently, so people may have heard of her, but this is When You Were Mine by Rebecca Searle. This I absolutely loved when I read it. I can't remember how old I was, 14 maybe, and it's a retelling of Romeo and Juliet, which I do not particularly care for, but it's set in the modern day, and it's told from Rosaline's point of view, so it's told from the point of view of a girl who is desperately in love with a guy and who claims to be desperately in love with her, and then she has to watch him go off with someone else. And yeah, I don't remember a lot about it. I think I may not enjoy this one as much as I did when I was younger, but I'm kind of curious because I remember it being really well written, and I was surprised by the Romeo and Juliet death, which is impressive because it's Romeo and Juliet, they die. And yeah, I just want to see if it holds up. So that's that one. The final book I have here in physical form that I want to reread is Stephen King's The Shining. I've read this book twice now, and I'm sure I only reread it about 2 years ago maybe. It's not my favourite Stephen King by any stretch of the imagination, but it's possibly my least favourite one actually. It's obviously a very famous one, and the sequel came out a couple of years ago now, and my plan was to reread it and then read the sequel. And I think I reread this, but then I didn't start the sequel. The sequel's like 1,000 pages, I'm pretty sure. And now it's been 2 years later and I still haven't read the sequel, and now I need to reread it again if I want to read the sequel to remind myself what happened in it. I also keep rereading this so much just because I didn't enjoy it very much in comparison to other Stephen King works. It's still like a solid 3 out of 5, 3.5 out of 5, but yeah, I feel like I'm missing something because everyone raves about The Shining, and I'd like to reread it again and see if my opinion has changed. And the final books I want to reread I do own in physical form, but I have no idea where they are, so you'll just have to use your imagination. The first one I am positive you know what the cover looks like anyway, and that is Breaking Dawn by Stephenie Meyer. So this is similar to the Marked series one. I recently rewatched the Breaking Dawn movies with my friend because she'd never seen them and she wanted to watch them. She was a Twilight fan when she was a child, but she never watched the movies, or finished watching the movies, and she never read Breaking Dawn. So she knew it would be bad, but she wanted to see how the series ended. So we got drunk and we watched it, and it made me want to reread the book. And I don't know why, because the book is very long. I know it's not good. I didn't like it even when it first got released and I was still in my Twilight phase. I just thought it didn't make any sense with the directions the plot took. But I feel compelled to reread it for whatever reason, so I plan to at some point. Again, I think I kind of want to see if it's as bad as everyone said it was, because it became cool to hate on Twilight, and I never loved Twilight the way some people loved it, but I was completely compelled the first time I read the books up until the final book, and I never hated it as much as some people hated it either. So I kind of want to see, because I know it's bad, but is it as bad as people say? It can't be as bad as people say. It didn't deserve that much hate, surely. But yeah, anyway, and then the final book I'm going to talk about, or series, is The Series of Unfortunate Event by Lemony Snicket. I've been watching the Netflix show with my partner, and I think they've lost interest actually, to be honest, because we haven't watched it for a while. We got up to the Carnivorous Carnival, but I still really want to watch it, and watching the series made me want to reread the books because I loved them when I was a kid. I read the first couple a lot. I think the first 7 or so I read to an insane amount, and then the later books I only read once, so I have a very distinct memory of the first lot of the series, particularly the 3rd one and the 7th one, which are my favourites, and then the rest of it I don't remember anything of what happens, and I'd rather read them before the Netflix series comes out, because at the moment I'm kind of reaching the point, like we're on Carnivorous Carnival and I don't remember what happens in that book, and we'll finish the series at some point, but I want to reread the other books before we get to that point in the series where I don't remember anything that happens and I have no idea what's going on. Yeah, and also they're really short, so I can blast through them quite quickly. I imagine they're not, I think each one's only like 200 pages or something. It's got the good writing style. I really liked Lemony Snicket's writing style. It's like Terry Pratchett for children. And yeah, so that is all the books I wanted to talk about today. I don't know when I'm going to reread any of these. Some of these were my goal to reread in 2018, and I don't think that's going to happen now because we're reaching the start of November, and I don't know if I want to spend the last 2 months reading these books, but I'm going to put them on my list to reread in 2019. And yeah, hopefully I'll get through some of them. If you've read any of these, particularly if you've read any of these recently, because a lot of these are kind of young adult books that you might have read when you were younger, do let me know if they held up for you, or if you did love them as a kid and you want to see a video on them, then let me know that too. If you like this video, please give me a thumbs up, it really helps me out, and I will see you next time.